We're gonna get better. So we gotta rock non-stop tonight. Hi, folks.
Sam Seder here. This is the live broadcast of the Majority Report. And as you probably have heard, there's a bit of a YouTube apocalypse that has been going on. Many news and politics channels have lost their advertising because of an algorithm that Google has implemented as a function of ads showing up on hate-filled channels. Well, we got caught up in that, and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved. So we need your help. You've probably heard from other channels that they're asking people to donate to a Patreon site. We are asking the same so that we can operate this YouTube feed without a cost to us. I mean, we don't look at YouTube as a huge revenue maker for us, but we need your help so that we're not losing money on it. So head over to our Patreon site. Here is the URL. We need your help. Just a couple of bucks, $2-3 a month would really help us out. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. Bye.
In many ways, they'll miss the good old days. Someday.
Hey folks, you know, in today's world that data security could not be more important. You got to protect your data. Behind the scenes, VMware's cybersecurity software is working overtime to ensure our virtual environments are safe and secure. DH Technologies and VMware are here to offer you a free demo of their virtualization software. Go to dhtech.com/demo to find out how to protect your organization today.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, June 26, 2017. My name is Michael Brooks on a Michael Monday, and this is the 4-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Guardian columnist Owen Jones on the dying neoliberal order in the UK and hopefully the world over, and why the likelihood of Jeremy Corbyn becoming the United Kingdom's next prime minister becomes more likely every day. It's a rebirth of democratic socialism. Can it happen globally? Plus, the Republicans are aiming to take away tens of millions of people's health care, get rid of protection for pre-existing conditions, literally to subsidize a tax cut for about 400 families. Kellyanne Conway says, hey, if you lose Medicaid, just get a job. Many people on Medicaid, of course, in fact, have jobs. Republican moderates like Dean Heller facing heat, pretending that they won't vote for this, but they're playing word games. Saudi Arabia making overtures to Israel as Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, as well as Israel, implement electricity cuts in Gaza. They see it as an opportunity to dislodge Hamas. Hamas betting wrong by cozying up to the Gulf. It's all part of a influx and very dangerous broader Middle East. Get to that. Sam Harris finally makes his way back into the Majority Report. New depths of creepy pseudo-intellectual sociopathy with really almost exiting his soft alt-right stance to a more overt one, while so-called Muslim reformer Majad Nawaz listens. Doesn't necessarily co-sign. I'm sure that will be helpful in his lawsuit against the Southern Poverty Law Center. And speaking of those kinds of people, very pathetic performance for the free speech rally in D.C. that took place. Richard Spencer and others showing up. It was a small, sparse crowd with a bleak, sparse, and awful message. All that and so much more, including some sound where a Republican congressman would like to remind us of drag the body to the park. All that and more on today's Majority Report. We're going to talk to Owen Jones about Jeremy Corbyn, but this really was something. He went to the Glastonbury Music Festival, which is, of course, big, globally recognized music festival in Scotland, in Glastonbury. And there was the kind of usual tired, boring, like, oh, look, Jeremy Corbyn's going in front of all these upscale socialists at a at a festival, and they're chanting for socialism, even though they have enough money to go to a festival. Actually, Corbyn's Labour Party actually won some of the wealthiest districts in the UK, and there's plenty of people of means who would actually like to see a better world and have problems addressed. So there's nothing particularly shocking about it. Socialism actually, in fact, benefits the many, not the few. Here is Jeremy.
Well, Glastonbury is in Somerset, England, not Scotland.
Pardon me. Excuse me. Why did I thought of that of Edinburgh? I don't know why I thought of that. Edinburgh is a theater festival. My mistake. My mistake. Okay. In the UK, in Britain, here is Jeremy Corbyn addressing the crowd and quoting one of his favorite poets.
One of my favourite poets, Percy Bysshe Shelley, who wrote in the early 19th century many, many poems and travelled extensively around Europe. But the line I like the best is this one. Rise like lions after slumber, in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth like dew, which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. I quote Shelley because he inspired like so many others do. I'm proud to be at Glastonbury because it inspires so many to music festivals all over the country. Let us be together and recognize another world is possible if we come together to understand that, understand the power we've got, and achieve that decent, better society where everyone matters and those poverty-stricken people are enriched in their lives and the rest of us are made secure by their enrichment. Thank you very much, Glastonbury. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm proud to be here.
It's beautiful. And the mythology that Jeremy Corbyn was some type of relic from people that were relics of the 1990s becomes more and more clear every day. That's the future. That's the stakes globally. And Jeremy Corbyn is carrying that forward. And it's not a surprise to see him at Glastonbury, and it makes a lot of sense that a lot of younger people, as well as people who are privileged, see a larger picture. And that's all he's articulating there. There's nothing surprising about it. And when the hack tabloid press in the UK is reduced to, look at how much Glastonbury tickets cost, and they like Jeremy Corbyn, we know that we have momentum. And when you have momentum, or really any other time, you want to feel comfortable. And pride starts on the inside. So celebrate yourself with MeUndies. MeUndies makes the ultimate feel-good undies with free shipping right to your door. Satisfaction guaranteed. Designed in LA. Every pair of MeUndies is made with micromodal fabric, 3 times softer than cotton. Their soft, stretchy undies come in ever-changing array of colors and patterns. No matter what your style, they've got something for you. Yes, Matt.
I've got some toy soldiers ones on the way.
That does not surprise me at all. And that's because MeUndies believes in people feeling good and being themselves, which is why MeUndies is putting their money where their underwear is during Pride Month. This is great. For every pair of special edition MeUndies you buy during Pride Month, MeUndies will donate $1 to Los Angeles LGBT Center. And as if you need another reason to try MeUndies, they're offering 20% off of your first pair and satisfaction guaranteed that you'll love them or your money back. Just visit our URL, MeUndies.com/majority. Head to MeUndies today. Pick up a pair of special edition. Celebrate MeUndies, and you'll not only get a discount on awesome undies, you'll be donating to an amazing cause. Check out MeUndies.com/majority today. Come on. You know what it is. We will be right back with Owen Jones on the Majority Report.
The future's been sold every night we're gone, and some karaoke songs. How we like to sing along, though the words are wrong. It really, really, really could happen. Yes, it really, really, really could happen. Satellites in every home. Yes, the universe was here for everyone.
Welcome back to the Majority Report. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Owen Jones. He's a columnist for The Guardian and an activist. Owen, thanks so much for joining us.
What an honor. What a huge honor to be here.
So, Owen, I'm a longtime admirer of your work. I think you're someone who has a sort of perfect kind of synthesis of a global, genuine left perspective and solidarity, which we're hopefully developing, and a very specific understanding of British politics, which those of us that are interested in the UK in and of itself, and I think now many of us who are interested in any counter trend to the disaster that we've been in for the last several decades, in fact, are inspired and interested by. You have a new column. We're going to get to the larger picture, but you have a column just published. And we played before we started the clip of Jeremy Corbyn speaking at Glastonbury, and the crowd really sort of rapturous for him, almost kind of. I mean, really, the only comparisons I could think of in modern politics would be Bernie Sanders and Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. You talked and you kind of made light of this lazy trope that you see a different version of it here, but this idea is like, oh, you're middle class and you can afford to be at a festival, but you support Jeremy Corbyn. How ridiculous. Now, you explain why the socialism Jeremy Corbyn advocates is actually beneficial not only for those stricken by poverty, but in fact the middle class as well. I'd like you to explain that and also explain what you mean by middle class in a British context.
Yeah, well, we use middle class in quite a different way to people in the United States. To us, middle class generally means professional, more affluent. It means, for example, I don't know, more likely to be people with university degrees who do professional jobs. Working class for us is more likely to be, I don't know, skilled workers, for example, people who work in offices, in factories, in supermarkets. So basically, the American concept of middle class is more our concept of working class, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Now, for a long time in Britain, the argument often used against the left is you will never, ever win over middle class voters, the more affluent voters in society who are under our electoral system seem to be absolutely critical to any government forming a majority. We have first past the post like you guys. That's impossible. So-called Middle England. That was always misconstrued. The real Middle England, the median wage in this country is about £26,000. I'm just saying, What is that in dollars? That's, I don't know. Here we go. I'm typing it in.
Yeah.
It's about $33,000.
That's a real journalist right there. As a commentator, I would have just made it up. Yeah,
got to be accurate.
Yeah.
So, that was the argument. But now what's quite comical is Labour having defied expectations. This general election was called by our calamitous Prime Minister Theresa May in the what seems like a lifetime in British politics, but it was only April. She called an election to crush the Labour Party, who at the time were on 23% of the polls. They ended up getting over 40%, running the Conservatives close on a radical left-wing programme, which was seen to defy political gravity. But some commentators in the aftermath, who had previously claimed there was no chance of any left-wing agenda getting anywhere near 40%, be looking to get 25, 20%, lots of those people felt. They've now said it's the wrong voters, that there were too many middle-class voters, that Labour hadn't gone, advanced amongst working-class voters. Mm-hmm. But the argument actually is, what's so, I think... just so pioneering about this form of socialism which is being reborn in Britain is it's a coalition of working class and middle class voters. So, for example, one of the policies which Labour has committed to is to abolish student debt. Mm-hmm. We've got some of the highest levels of student debt for people punished for aspiring to an education in the entire Western world. And the argument used by centrists was this is just a handout to the middle classes. But of course, Labour, under the left, should be arguing to help both working class and middle class, those middle income families and also those who are in poverty. And that's the coalition we're building. And what's so fascinating is because Labour went into this election saying the top 5%, those earning more than £80,000 a year, should pay more tax. Right. Corporation tax should go up. It's still, by the way, a lot lower than it is in the United States, even after Labour plans to increase corporation tax, as well as the so-called financial transaction tax on the city, which caused the City of London, which caused a financial disaster here in Britain.
That's your Wall Street.
It's the equivalent of Wall Street, exactly. Right. That we can use that money to invest in public services. Now, the Blairite, New Labour, centrist, our equivalent of the Clintonites, if you like, they would have argued if you ask the top 5% to pay more money, middle-class voters will be repelled because even if they're not in that top 5%, they aspire to get there one day. There's that expression in the United States, isn't that? All Americans feel they're millionaires who've fallen on hard luck. Right. And it was that sense, that was the argument used. But it didn't work. We had an increase in middle-class support, including people who might one day earn over £80,000 and be asked to pay a bit more money. So I think what we're seeing is all the claims about the left of being upturned, that you can build a potentially winning coalition of working class and middle class, of the more affluent and the poorest in society. And that is how we're going to transform American society, British society, and societies across the Western world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I have one note and then two questions I'll fold into one. I mean, if I remember, I think it was many years, I don't even remember, it was a while ago, but I remember watching a television program on cable years ago and watching an analyst actually say, Well, the difficult thing about taxes is that a lot of Americans think to themselves, I don't want to be taxed at a high rate one day when I make $1 million. And I just remember being, I was probably high, to be honest. And I just remember being like, that's a serious thing you could say on television, that we can't implement a national policy that needs to happen now because of somebody's potential future, like, dream board fantasy life. Like, what world am I living in? That's the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. But the other things, and I one is specific to the UK, and the other I think is more kind of global, because I think the other thing that just sort of strikes me as an observer is that if the Conservatives are going to run around and say that Labour under Jeremy Corbyn and McDonald are irresponsible and you can't trust them with macroeconomic decisions and they're out of touch with the global economy and all of the sort of tropes and, strong and steady and all of the nonsense about Theresa May. Well, didn't the Tories kill their brand by leading you guys through Brexit, which is actually, other than the bipartisan project of deregulating the city under Thatcher, Blair, and Brown, isn't that by far the most irresponsible decision that's been undertaken in the modern UK era? I guess, other than austerity. But I mean, this is even worse just from that purely narrow technical economic standpoint. So there goes their reputation for competence. And then I think, secondly, that what you were talking about as far as kind of we would say in the United States, upper middle class voters or affluent voters, it's not as if people who are not completely disconnected from real life, like, say, the true plutocrats or, Koch brother types of people. But even if people are doing quite well, they will have some direct experience, maybe even more so, of a lot of people near them, like their kids, as an example, doing all of the quote unquote right things. Going to college, studying something that makes sense, blah, 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 and seeing diminished job prospect, diminished earnings, massive debt. So I think this notion that these kind of more broad-based stagnation and inequalities are not felt by even people that might be potentially quite affluent is actually quite disconnected from how broad those problems really are.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot in that. I mean, on the Tories, on the Conservatives, David Cameron, our former Prime Minister, before the general election where he went up in 2015 against Ed Miliband, then leader of the Labour Party, he tweeted out this tweet, which has now become pretty notorious for reasons you will soon discover. He tweeted, "Britain faces a simple and inescapable choice. Stability and strong government with me, or chaos with Ed Miliband." I tell you what, we've had nothing but stability. Yeah, nothing but stability for the last 2 years. Stability coming out of our ears. Yeah, obviously this is what's been unleashed ever since, is the biggest period of political chaos since World War II in this country, where the political miscalculations of two Conservative Prime Ministers, David Cameron and Theresa May, for partisan political purposes for the Conservative Party, have led to absolute chaos in this country. So David Cameron promised a referendum on the EU, not in the national interest, but because he had right-wing Conservative backbenchers who were nipping at his heels. So he promised that referendum and then completely mishandled it. And then that led to 52% of the population voting to leave. That then led to him falling as Prime Minister. I, at the time, suggested he was the worst Prime Minister in Britain since Neville Chamberlain in the 1930s, who's notorious for appeasement. But lots of historians corrected me. You'll like this. Lots of historians corrected me and said, well, Chamberlain helped with rearmament, which was necessary for taking on the Nazis. So they said, actually, he was the worst Prime Minister since Lord North in the 18th century.
I'm very familiar with Lord North.
After he lost, of course, after the American successful War of Independence.
In your face.
In your face, Lord North.
In your face,
David
Lord
Cameron's
North.
taken your crown.
Yes.
But then Theresa May looked at David Cameron's title of worst Prime Minister since the 18th century and said, hold my beer. So what she did at the beginning, midway through April, is when the Labour's in absolute meltdown, terrible poll ratings. We will crush them as an electoral force. That's what she planned to do. And of course, then what happened is she went into election, lost her majority, and Britain has been reduced to the laughing stock of Europe. So the Conservatives have really played a blinder on this. But on the Brexit, in terms of economic insecurity, lots of people voted to leave the EU, because they felt that, Britain has gone through the longest fall in wages since the early 19th century now, since the Napoleonic Wars. Lots of people felt there was a lack of secure jobs. Their industries had vanished, which their communities depended on. That's why lots of people voted to leave. It's not just the Tories to blame, but also New Labour under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, which failed to overturn a lot of that inequality. Equally, I think that point you make about middle class and working class people in the British sense, well, lots of people who are traditionally middle class in Britain have suffered now as well, for lots of reasons. Lots of professional public sector workers have suffered a pay freeze now for years, which means their wages have fallen quite significantly. Their work has become more precarious. I think of university lecturers who've been casualised, and their work, they often don't know how many hours they're working a week.
What does casualised mean?
So casualised means that you end up with, instead of instead of the benefits of being a full-time worker where you have a set hours, a set salary.
It's like being an adjunct, I guess.
Exactly. You become, you don't know basically what hours you get, your wages, your salaries completely, fluctuates rapidly. You don't have job security, basically.
Right.
So, you've got a housing crisis in Britain where home ownership has been in a state of collapse. It's now back to where it was in the 1980s. And that includes the children of middle class parents, often who end up having to live with their parents because they can't get an affordable home of their own. So I would say what's happened in Britain is, and then there's the issue of student debt. Often children from relatively middle class backgrounds go to university and are saddled with debt, which means their living standards are suppressed. So we've got in this country, it's true that working class Britain has disproportionately suffered from everything from wages falling, cuts to public services, housing crisis, and so on, and cuts to social security. But equally, lots of middle class people have suffered as well. And that's why Labour's able to stitch together a much broader coalition. And I think what we're seeing in this country, by the way, in the late 1970s, we had what was called the post-war consensus. So after World War II, Clement Attlee's Labour government, he's then Prime Minister, came to power, deposed Winston Churchill, and introduced public ownership of industry, high taxes, strong trade unions, government intervention in the economy. In the late 70s, that collapsed. Thatcher came along, introduced a new consensus of deregulation, privatisation, lower taxes on the wealthy and corporations, government retreating from the economy. And we're now seeing that consensus is now in meltdown. And what summed up the fall of the consensus of the 1970s was this iconic moment called the Winter of Discontent, when there was a wave of public sector strikes for the right. That's a critical part of the story, the evils of collectivism, big government, over unions with too much power. And this time round, we've just seen the Grenfell Tower atrocity, really, in which dozens of working class people burned to death in their own homes in the richest borough of one of the richest cities that has ever existed in the history of humanity. And that was a story of a housing crisis because government abdicated to the market, deregulation because of failure of fire safety, where material was used to insulate and adorn the building, and flammable, cheaper material was used to cut costs. So now that sums up the fall of this order, an order which puts profit before people, which puts deregulation before the safety of human beings. And I think now what we're seeing in Britain is the Thatcherite consensus, neoliberalism, whatever you want to call it, is in a state of total collapse.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly right. Now, it's opening the lens a bit, and I think, and also, there's still obviously divisions inside the Labour Party, though it's quite interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong. Actually, let's attend to this first, then we'll kind of open it up more broadly. There's always the debate inside politics, certainly in the United States, and it gets laid bare when you talk to different versions of, say, Blair people or Clinton people, or Obama people for that matter, maybe even more so with Obama people. There's this, in some ways it's almost even more disturbing. I always kind of say that the people that have emerged in the political moment we're in and have actually kind of counter-programmed what you would expect third-way people to be like, which is, we're the ultimate kind of, this was the Hillary Clinton thing. We know how to win. We might be less idealistic than you, but we're all about getting and acquiring power and blah, blah, blah. Now, what's odd is that a lot of these people have actually proven themselves quite incapable of getting power in the modern context and actually quite almost idealistically and romantically fixated to this kind of typical, sort of tepid centrist agenda. Now, there are others, and it seemed to happen after the results of Corbyn, others in the new Labour right that seem to some extent reverse themselves and basically just say, hey, we were wrong, and this is about winning, and it looks like Jeremy can win now. And I'm just wondering, again, we'll open this in a broader context, but since he's been in power, there have been endless attempts to dislodge him from members of Labour in Parliament itself. Obviously, it's hard to imagine Tony Blair voted Labour in this election, but you had many other people trying to undermine him. But then after the results came in, everybody from a guy like Jack Straw, who helped lead the UK into the invasion of Iraq, was Tony Blair's foreign secretary, to a guy like Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's top political strategist, but who seems to me is a type of guy who really is more so than Tony Blair. He's a Labour guy, and he really wants Labour to win. He has very different politics than me, but he does seem to kind of have that conviction. So does this tamp down now? Like, I guess what I'm saying is the right that opposed Corbyn, are we starting to differentiate between just the purely venile, like Tony Blair, the people that actually believe this stuff, who, have this weird kind of 90s politics, and the people who were like, oh, I thought this would fail, but now I realize it's successful, so I'm on board. How is that kind of shaking out?
Yeah, I think you've got to separate the different factions out there. I mean, if we look at New Labour and what it represented, and you get the kind of New Labour nostalgic crew who just stuck in 1997 and can never escape. That's when Tony Blair won a landslide victory after 18 years of a Conservative government, and they will look at that as that's the formula to win, and any departure from that formula will mean catastrophic electoral consequences. And the point about the late 90s was that brand of politics was on the march across the Western world.
Yeah, that was the global third way, yeah.
Absolutely. The Clintons of the White House. You had Gerhard Schroeder of the Social Democrats in Germany. You had Lionel Jospin in France with a third-way socialist government. You had in many other countries, from Italy to the Netherlands, the Nordic countries, that brand of
Thabo Mbeki in South Africa was part of those meetings. Cardozo in Brazil. I mean, it was truly global at that moment.
It was, and actually, Brazil, Peter Mandelson, the New Labour spin doctor, one of the co-founders of New Labour, looked to that Brazilian presidency as one of their co-thinkers, and was very so denounced Lula when he took over as president after him. So yeah, that brand of politics was a period of that time. It was a period after. There was a period of free market triumphalism after the end of the Cold War, the form of globalization we'd had, the rise of the new right, the kind of sense of defeatism the left felt, the lack of any political project on the left reduced to being very defensive, stop the cut, stop privatization, stop the world I want to get off, rather than having a vision of how society could be run.
Right.
But clearly now what's happened is New Labour have no ideas. They have no vision. So-called centrism has collapsed as any, centrist, the third way. They don't have any political vision whatsoever. And they don't have anything that relates to the grievances of a Western world which has suffered the terrible, devastating consequences of a financial sector which plunged us into calamity, and stagnating wages and insecurity and all the rest of it. They have no answers to these things. But what's the point now is they would always argue, as you say before, look, I'm sorry, folks, you're going to have to abandon a lot of the things you believe in, because you've got to win power. And if you don't win power, you can't help the poorest in society. You're actually being selfish if you're left wing, because that means the right will always win. It's your fault as a consequence. And that's something we've had, obviously, in this country. But you've got to separate people out, because Tony Blair, in the first leadership campaign that Jeremy Corbyn won in 2015, said that with a left-wing programme, he wouldn't want to win.
Right.
So, even if that was... he was in the position of two. He thought it was unelectable, but undesirable as well.
Right.
So that's that wing of Blairism, which would prefer a Conservative government to a left-wing Labour government.
I want marriage equality in the UK, Emirati weapons contracts abroad.
Indeed, it's neoliberalism that likes gay people, basically. Right, yeah, I mean, that's basically a way of summing it up. Right. We'll go and invade Iraq and murder, hundreds of thousands of people, but we will accept, and I can say this as a gay man, we'll accept, equal rights for LGBT people. Yeah, I mean, there is that, definitely. socially liberal, economically free market, that kind of approach.
Right.
But then I think in the Parliamentary Labour Party with Labour MPs, it's not homogenous. They are a small minority, that group. You had others who would have said this is desirable but unelectable,
right?
Which is quite a fundamentally different view. They thought this is heading these sorts of policies and ideas. On an individual level, they would have said these poll very well. So Labour proposing, for example, public ownership of utilities, overwhelming support for that, according to the polls. But they would have said if you put all of these policies together, a big left-wing agenda, then people just won't vote for it. They'll go, you can't pay for it, you can't cost it, and so on. And they'll just go for the Tories because of economic security and they're better at, balancing the books or whatever. And this election discredited that. It showed that is just not true. So those, if you like, were attached to centrism out of pessimism, out of the view the left couldn't win. They've changed their mind, and actually a lot of them feel liberated. I think Ed Miliband, the former Labour leader, is one of them.
Yes.
He went into the last general election with a programme that was far more timid than he personally would have wanted.
Right.
And he felt he had no choice because of the people around him and where the electorate were at. Those people feel liberated now. They feel, oh my word, the electorate are more left-wing than we thought they were. This is fantastic. Right. We can finally say the things we want. There is a minority who are looking at this miserably, and for example, Philip Collins, the former, who's a former Blair speechwriter, he's been writing in the Times calling for a new Macron, the French president's centrist style party in Britain, which is amazing, isn't it? So they spend years going.
Don't you already have liberal Democrats, anyways?
Well, exactly. If you want a centrist option, vote Lib Dem, and about 7% of the population did. Yeah, I mean, right. Centrism is on offer, but so their view now, they spent a long time. Their argument was this is never going to win. The British public will never ever accept left-wing ideas. The evidence is now in. They've gone, yeah, but they shouldn't be accepting these ideas, and now we need a new party to stop that government ever coming to power. So you've got to divorce them. There's the ideologues, and then there was the pessimists. And the pessimists now have changed their mind.
Yeah, I think we have a very similar dynamic in the United States, although it's added, I don't know, less so I think in the UK. There's some people that extraordinarily have actually attempted to use, I call it kind of Walmart intersectionality to kind of suggest somehow that in the United States people that don't support any kind of robust economic agenda are actually somehow simultaneously also the genuine advocates for dealing with systemic racism and misogyny in American society. It's a very kind of bizarre political jiu-jitsu, and it's also on behalf of people who help build their political careers on signing a death warrant for a mentally incapacitated black man, as an example.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Which, so it's quite bizarre. But I do.
Hillary Clinton talking about predators and all the rest.
Right. Super Predators was apparently acceptable. I was on a program once where I made that point, and the response that I got was that I was too young and totally unfair because every single person in the 1990s said Super Predator, and that it was essentially sexist to bring that up. And I actually literally on my phone had like Cornel West quotes from like the 90s in front of me of him, condemning this language. But at any rate, I mean, it's kind of maddening. But certainly not everybody was saying that in the 1990s. There were people that were calling it out then. But as you say, it was a marginalized position, just like globally serious economic policies were marginalized in the 90s. In the 90s, neoliberals were reading columns in the New Republic about how welfare was bad for poor people and people of color, and that was trendy neoliberal thinking. So let's be clear.
It's for their own good.
Yes, let's be
clear. To make their life miserable.
Exactly. Let's be clear about the origins of all this stuff and not get twisted about where we are today. But I think it's quite. In the United States, everything you described as far as skyrocketing student debts, as far as structural inequality, stagnating wages, probably even more extreme than in the UK. And we also don't have an NHS. We don't have the kind of, basic buffers. And in the United States, you definitely see Corbyn and Macron have become the proxies here for, this ongoing debate inside the Democratic Party. You see some people like a guy like Chuck Schumer, who maybe to some extent is a bit more operationalized, and he's willing to get a bit more serious about higher wages and everything else, although he's not, he's incredibly close to Wall Street and not a particularly effective communicator. But the Macronism versus Corbynism has become that kind of proxy war between the center and the left. And, my read is that Macron is fresh. Most of French people, thankfully, don't want fascism. I mean, he was the obvious vote in the second round. But it seems to be that if Hollande, who was the previous president and a socialist, but essentially adopted a very market-oriented agenda and did not keep on his promises for a stimulus and for a counter-EU strategy to the austerity of Merkel, he left office with literally about a 5% approval rating. I don't see why people are expecting much different from Macron. So my read is that Macronism is the last gasp, along with Obama, of third wayism. And those are personally, especially in Obama's case, very appealing and admirable people with good leadership qualities. But they did not represent any type of the sort of new politics that we need for the age, that ironically Corbyn and Sanders in their 70s both do.
Well, spot on, and obviously Sanders would have won and will be president soon. So
yes.
No, but I think that point about Bernie would have won.
Bernie would have won. Hashtag Bernie would have won.
I slipped that in. We've got a meme at the moment, by the way, which is well, obviously Jeremy Corbyn is prime minister. In terms of Macron, I mean, when people bring that up here, Macron being a model, I'm like, all right, introduce a two-stage presidential contest, get 24% of the vote in the first round, and then go up against the fascists, and then claim that's a big victory for centrism. It was ridiculous,
right?
And what was heartening was, the combined share of Mélenchon, who had a great rally and got a fifth of the vote. Also, Hamon, the French socialist candidate, who was very much on the left of the socialists, had very similar ideas to Mélenchon. Combined, they got over a quarter of the vote. It's tragic, actually. I think Hamon should have stood down and supported Mélenchon, and Mélenchon could have become president then. And then, obviously, the narrative would be the onward march of the left. So,
right.
Because Mélenchon, all the polls showed, would have decisively have beaten Marine Le Pen, the fascist.
Yes.
So I agree with that. I think the problem is, Macron's ended up as a last gasp because of those particular specific circumstances. But at the end of the day, Macron represents a defence of the very policies that have bred the conditions that fascism has exploited,
right.
Which is stagnating living standards, public services shredding of job security, mass unemployment. All of those things, his policies, will make worse. The cuts to the public sector and public sector jobs he's proposing, the cuts to taxes for the rich. These are the sorts of policies that have already been enforced all over Europe and have caused devastating social and economic dislocation, and which the far right have exploited. So, my own fear, obviously, with Marine Le Pen is she's playing the long game. She just thinks the next presidential election is 2022, and having had two centrist presidents that have failed, she'll be able to march in there. So I think the French left has to prepare and mobilise, because there will be big struggles now in France on the streets. And I was in France in March, I think it was, during that, in the earlier parts of that contest, where it's just, there was a big mass movement there. The left has been revived. France for a long time is quite depressing politically to look at, because whereas in Spain you've got the rise of Podemos,
right.
A left-wing party which opposed the cuts and so on. The main beneficiary in France for a long time is the National Front. And what really depressed me, the fascist National Front, what really depressed me about the National Front is, for a long time, they led amongst French people aged 18 to 25. Right. But in the end, Mélenchon, the leftist, he got the biggest share of the youth vote, which is very heartening.
Yes.
And if it hadn't been for Mélenchon, there's a very good chance Marine Le Pen would have done a lot better. So I think now the task of the French left, I think the left is being revived. We see it in the US. We see it in Britain. We see it in Spain. We've seen it in many other countries as well, increasingly, is to prepare now to take on Macron. Obviously, the left had to vote for Macron to stop the fascists, but they didn't endorse his programme. It was an anti-fascist vote. And now they have to mobilise to stop the attacks on working people in France, and to prepare the foundations for a revived left, which is in a position to win the presidency.
Oh, and final question. This is an extreme example because obviously Greece is at such a tremendous disadvantage given its size, given its debt obligations, given what the Eurozone has done to it in terms of just sort of a slow motion kind of, murder through austerity, essentially. But, when Syriza came to power a couple of years ago, watching a left party get to power and capitulate, and I think that, there's the Yanis Varoufakis narrative where he really kind of basically, it's a frame of, Tsipras and the leadership essentially, again, they capitulated, they fell on their sword, they didn't really have the kind of vision or the strength. Then there's, someone like Paul Mason, I think, who writes in the UK, who was a bit more of a sympathetic read of Syriza, which is, they're really getting forced from all sides, and having Syriza in there has made Greece certainly more humane towards refugees. They've been able to slightly minimize some of the kind of brutality of what's been inflicted on them. But I think the broader question that arises for me, and it would have happened, if Bernie had won, which he would have if he got the nomination, Bernie would have won. Bernie would have won. But if he had won, and it would have been very significant because he would have appointed an economic team, which for the first time in decades would have done something regulatorily about Wall Street. There would have been things that out of the gate were of major benefit to the American public. But legislatively, a progressive agenda, just as frankly a Hillary Clinton centrist agenda, would be dead on arrival in any Republican Congress. And even if, frankly, mostly, largely Democratic Congress as well. It shows that left politics is also just at a structural electoral disadvantage because of what's happened over the past several decades. We're almost playing on other people's turf in terms of, the power of concentrated wealth and economic dogmas and everything else. So, as there's an advance of actually gaining power and Jeremy becomes prime minister and everything else, what do you think that kind of larger challenge of when we start to assume power, but we're almost still playing in the context of someone else's game?
Well, I think Syriza in Greece is, I was in Greece for that election, and I saw the jubilation on the streets. And when Syriza came to power, it was the first radical left government in Europe since the 1930s, really. And the point about Greece, I put this to Pablo Iglesias, the leader of Podemos in Spain, and I said, look, what happened to Greece? They'll just do the same to you if you come to power. And he said, well, look, Greece represents 2% of the Eurozone economy. To be brutally honest, it was expendable. They could, if the EU leaders looked at Greece, and, Donald Tusk, the head of the European Council, said that they weren't, and he said this openly, it's astonishing, really. He said they weren't scared about economic or financial contagion. They were scared about political contagion.
Right.
Their worry was if Greece was seen to win even concessions from the European Union, having been devastated by cuts which doubled poverty, where unemployment amongst young people at one point was 60%, where public services were devastated, with the healthcare system in a state of collapse, with suicide and infant mortality increasing. Austerity killed people in Greece. If they won concessions, then people in Spain, for example, in Ireland, in Italy, would take the logical conclusion that, oh, wow, well, they did it, so we'll just vote for similar parties. And that would lead to a domino effect across the European Union. So they punished Greece, and even though it was possible to do so because Greece is such a small part of the European Union, it's a tiny part of the Eurozone economy, and they did it as, to stop them, it's pour encourager les autres, the French expression. It's to stop others taking the same route. And the main fear they had was Spain, that if Greece fell, if you like, then the Spanish electorate would vote for a Podemos-led government, which would then lead to an existential crisis of the entire neoliberal project in the European Union. And I suppose the difference is, if you do get a government, if, for example, a government came to power in Spain, which is one of the major Eurozone economies, you could never, ever, ever, ever treat them in that way, because it would lead to a collapse of the entire Eurozone and the European Union. It's just impossible. So, you can't blackmail them. You can't force them into retreat in the same way. In Britain, we're not in the Eurozone, which is the EU countries. Not all the EU countries have the euro currency and are bound by those rules. But nonetheless, we're now leaving the European Union, as you know. But the critical point is, if a left-wing government comes to power, they will face overwhelming and formidable opposition from economic elites in their own country and in other countries as well, who will attempt to strangle them at birth. And, there's a famous TV show based on a book which from the 1980s in Britain called A Very British Coup, where a left-wing Labour government comes to power led by this guy, a steel worker called Harry Perkins, and the establishment do everything, economic sabotage, the US gets involved. It was all partly based on what happened to Salvador Allende's government in Chile in 1973, which ended in 1973 with the
on September 11th, in fact.
On September the 11th, my own family took in refugees from Chile. It was a very kind of one of the big symbolic moments of the defeats the left suffered.
Right.
But I do think the difference is this time is, or what we'll have to do, is have mass mobilization of people in their workplaces and their communities. We're already seeing the basis of that in this country. We're seeing a mass movement has emerged where if Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party win the next election, which the Conservatives privately think is going to happen, that's why Theresa May, a humiliated and disgraced Prime Minister in many ways, is still in power, is still the Prime Minister, because they're scared if she falls, it will lead the way to an election where Jeremy Corbyn will become Prime Minister. And that would be the first radical left government in the history of this country, which is astonishing in 2017, given what we've gone through over the last couple of decades. But nonetheless, that would then obviously strengthen the left elsewhere. But my plea is, and this is an international plea for solidarity, we will have to build the mother of all movements in this country, but my word, we'll need international solidarity.
Yes.
And the movement, the Sanders movement, the revived American left, now stronger than it's been in 4 decades, we will need your support and solidarity, because particularly the US presidency and all the rest will try and strangle such a government and isolate it and cause all sorts of economic damage and all the rest to stop others, including in America, doing the same thing. So let's build the mother of all international solidarity movements. Let's mobilize the people, the millions of people all over the Western world who want an alternative, because the lesson will be, if we can do it in Britain, then we can do it everywhere, all over the Western world. And the right of, the economic elites who have been drunk on their own triumphalism for decades now should be absolutely terrified, because the hangover is coming. And what we will see are movements and governments which will redistribute wealth and power in the interest of the majority. They should be worried, given they thought it was the end of history and they'd carry on having their big party at the expense of everybody else. But change is coming. But it will need a huge movement here, and it will need international solidarity. So, yeah, let's do this. And Bernie would have won, by the way.
And Bernie would have won, by the way. And also, I do want to say, on an incredibly petty level, it will be really fun if Jeremy becomes prime minister to watch Trump be like, yeah, I supported that guy all along. Great guy.
Is that what he'd do?
Oh, I'm sure he would. He would pretend. For one, there would be one tweet, like, strong campaign, many not the few, similar to me, exclamation point. You know what? Honestly, if Jeremy Corbyn said that Trump was a great socialist leader, Trump might pretend or actually genuinely like him for a couple. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a
great socialist. I love socialism.
Big league into Ho Chi Minh.
Yeah.
It's true.
Big league socialism.
Big league socialism. That's what we're advocating, Owen. Big league socialism.
Big league socialism. Let's do it.
Solidarity forever. Owen Jones, thank you so much. Guardian columnist, activist. Appreciate your time so much. Hope to do it again soon.
Will do.
Thanks.
You too.
Bye.
It's an honor.
Okay, everybody, we're going to go to the fun half where you can join us at 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. The IMs are on. Support the show. Become a member today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. All that good stuff. We'll see you on the fun half.
All the time, she said no, 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 like to speak my mind. She said no, 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 and I know her time's not free. She didn't waste none on me. Situation sad. She said no, 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 things are looking bad. She said no, 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 and if it was up to me,
Welcome back to the fun half. Let's go straight to the phone lines. You're calling from a 347 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Hello. Going once.
Hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's on your mind, man?
Hey. Oh, sorry, I didn't say anything because you said 347, not 321. But
it says 347. There's something going on with that because yours do. That's weird. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. How's it going, man?
Good. What's on your mind?
I just want to say, you guys always have like the best guests, like every single day. So props to you guys. So since you guys were talking about, I guess centrism versus leftism and the proxy war, I wanted to talk about the John Ossoff campaign. This is Marcus, the Brazilian, by the way.
Oh, hey, Marcus.
That's my name. Hey, man, what's going on?
What's going on?
So I was pretty much following you guys during his campaign, and I just want to focus on strategy. And so I was watching his campaign, and I watched his debates, and I'm also from the South. I live in California now, but I was born and raised in South Carolina, and I know Georgia. I have family out there in Georgia and stuff. So I'm pretty familiar with the demographics there in Atlanta. So John Ossoff was really appealing to me, and I was pretty much agreeing with you guys with his strategy. And then when he lost, it was like kind of a big shock to me. I mean,
that was a shock.
Yeah, it was a big shock.
Okay.
It was a shock to me because I know it's a red state, and I know, it's not an easy win or anything. But it seemed to me like he was picking up a lot of ground, and obviously they put, I don't know, like $5 million into his campain, and
way more than that. Way more. They put
more than that.
26,
So,
I think 30 million. I think overall. I thought it was when it was all combined, massive infusion of cash. I don't know this, but like the amount of money spent on that race might have been more than the entire last UK election campaign, given their finance regulations and how short their campaigns are. Like it was a tremendous amount of money. But anyways, what's your what's your kind of takeaway?
Okay, yeah, I'll go straight to the point. So basically, I guess the whole focusing on having a centrist strategy in red states like these is, to me, I don't think it's the way to go, because I know it seems to me that Democrats are keep trying to appeal to the right and pull in some votes from that side. And I know this is anecdotal, but every single conservative I've ever met would never vote for a Democrat if their life depended on it.
Sure.
They just wouldn't.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, we saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of that with the general election with Trump. I met and know a lot of conservatives that do not like Trump at all. They think he's a, gross human being. But they ended up voting for him because
they voted
Hillary
for their
Clinton,
candidate. No, I mean, I agree.
They voted for their candidate.
I agree.
So,
yeah, I agree.
So I think this going forward, I think the strategy should be, even if this isn't the candidate's ideology, they should go full blown left and try to pull people from the left and try to get those votes.
I mean, as I said before, I think that like as an example, like in Quist's race in a state like Montana, he ran generally the right sort of campaign. He probably should have been much more negative on Gianforte, but I understand.
Yeah,
I understand why Ossoff ran the race he did. Although at a certain point, even I've said this before, even if you're running a centrist campaign, you still actually have to make an attack and say something. And he didn't do it. But I think it's also a question of, who he was as a candidate and what that part of the party is looking for. I mean, he was just a kind of boring rich kid. He didn't have like much going on, and that's what they're obsessed with. I mean, that's what it is. But I agree. I think that anybody who is left the Republican Party because they're concerned about just basic grotesqueness have already left. Appreciate the call, man. Thanks. You're calling from a 608 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm William from Minnesota.
Hey, William, what's on your mind?
Hey, I just wanted to recommend a guest.
Sure.
I was listening on Friday, and either you or Matt brought up the Nonpartisan League in North Dakota.
Yeah, Matt did.
Set up in, yeah.
Okay, so you want to email us the guest at majorityreporters@gmail.com, or just say it real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I can. What should I put in the subject line?
You just put guest recommendation. We'll keep track of those. But tell
But
us
I'm curious
now.
who it is.
Tell us now. Yeah. But just email
Oh,
us
okay.
as well.
Yeah, is my former professor. He's a historian of the American Northwest and just wrote a book on the Nonpartisan League called Insurgent Democracy.
And what's his name?
And Michael Lansing.
Michael Lansing. Okay, thanks so
Yeah,
much.
I think he'd be fantastic.
That
So yeah,
sounds like a
I'll
great
send
guest.
the email, and if you'll look for it, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Appreciate the call.
I'm going to buy that probably today.
Thanks.
Oh, great.
Oh, that's a great. Nefart asked Nation of Islam Obama how his Ramadan was. You know, it's so great celebrating Ramadan, not as president, as you're around less white people. Now, I am irritable with all the fasting. So Michelle and I charter a jet where we crisscross the globe for the shortest days. All that said, I can't wait till we dispose of Trump and create the caliphate. Phase 2. Allahu Akbar. Big Steve. Pretty sure Jimmy Dore took a swipe at Sam in his assertion that we shouldn't get rid of Pelosi. Tweeted out at you. Not sure if you saw it. He even did a little impression of Sam at 1:20 on this video. I'll check it out. U.S. Supreme Court will hear Trump's Muslim ban and is allowing part of it to take effect immediately. This Gorsuch deal is paying off bigly. Well, I mean, look. Yeah, courts matter. This seemed like a pretty basic point. And why is it that somehow on this show we are able to simultaneously advocate global socialism and also recognize that handing the Supreme Court to radical ideologues for generations is bad for us?
Because we're getting paid by MSNBC.
Because we're getting paid.
All of us.
Exactly. What we want is we want you guys to advocate insurgent class-based politics and collectivizing the means of production in vital industries. But really what you're doing is advocating for John Ossoff. I don't know what that was. Georgia Insult. Great to hear Owen Jones on the Majority Report, the absolute boy, strong voice for anti-austerity and progressive social change in UK. He's welcome to Norwich anytime he wants. Bertel Mecht. Who doggy? 2 days, 3 guests, no strikeouts. Brooksy, you're killing it with the bookings of recent. Also, has anyone seen or heard from Ossoff since Tuesday? It appears as though he deconstructed and reconjoined his host body in Ottawa and Paris. What I'm saying is that Ossoff is basically the reproductive leftover of asexual reproductive fluids that secrete from the center nest where Macron and Trudeau feed and grow. And now that Ossoff's purpose is served, he can rejoin the slurry of evilium at the bottom of the nest. The neoliberals will all eventually return to the nest like salmon returning to the spawn grounds to die. Let us hope their homecoming comes soon. Bernie would have won. Hillary had slain. I am genuinely astonished that no one in Bernie's team found the passage from that book during the height of the primary. It is like amazing.
Well, that's the sort of thing they would not bring up. Like they were running a campaign where they're going to weaponize something like that.
I know. They were so nice. Meanwhile, it was like, did you see that Bernie was making a point in a debate? That fucking asshole. So the House bill cuts about $756 billion over a decade in Medicaid. The Senate bill is even steeper. And the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities estimates that 400 top-income households alone would receive a $33 billion in tax cuts between 2019 and 2028. This is now I'm quoting now from Vox. This is the equivalent to the amount that the federal government spends on Medicaid expansion in 4 states: Alaska, Arkansas, West Virginia, and Nevada. The Medicaid expansion there covers an estimated 725 and 800,000 enrollees. So to subsidize a tax cut for 400 people, you're eliminating Medicaid expansion entirely for 4 poor states where over 500,000 people rely on it. That is the stark 1-to-1 ratio of the Republican death plan. Now, Kellyanne Conway has been allowed back out on television for some godforsaken reason. She must have told Trump that he had a great new tweet or something. And I just want to be very clear. There's something illustrative about this because Kellyanne Conway, everybody knows, is obviously an unstable liar who will pitch and shill for anything. But what she's lying about here and the absolute callousness that she's demonstrating here is not Trump. This is Republican. She's going to lie in this extraordinarily callous way about Medicaid on This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
You are currently in Medicaid. If you became a Medicaid recipient through the Obamacare expansion, you are grandfathered in. We're talking about in the future. You know, Obamacare took Medicaid, which was designed to help the poor, the needy, the elderly, the sick, the disabled, also children and pregnant women. It took it and it went way above the poverty line and opened it up to many able-bodied Americans who should probably find other, should at least see if there are other options for them. If they're able-bodied and they want to work, then they'll have employer-sponsored benefits like you and I do.
Kellyanne, hold on a second. There's no way you can say that a 15-year-old on Medicaid today is not going to be affected by the cuts in the future. Well, you said everybody who's on Medicaid now is grandfathered in and is not going to face any cuts, and that simply is not factual if you have more than $800 billion in cuts. It also
you
raises
keep calling them cuts, but we don't see them as cuts. It's slowing the rate of growth in the future and getting Medicaid back to where it was. Obamacare expanded the pool of Medicaid recipients beyond its original intentions. And George, you have to look at the whole health care bill, 142 pages in totem here to have a full conversation.
Okay, so of course George Stephanopoulos is right, and she's literally lying because, yes, Medicaid was expanded by Obama, therefore cutting it will be a cut, regardless of this supposed original intended purpose. Now, really briefly, quoting now from Jonathan Cohn, 79% of families on Medicaid are where someone works. 59% have jobs themselves, according to Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation. The problem is that many work in low-paying and temporary or part-time jobs that don't offer coverage. In 2014, just 30% of working adults with incomes at or below the poverty line had employee-sponsored coverage available to them. Walmart is the largest private employer in the country. Walmart associates do not get benefits like health care. So she's talking about a massive pool of people who are at or below the poverty line who do work full time and are, quote unquote, able-bodied and want to work. They're just working starvation wages to subsidize greater bonuses for shareholders and CEOs, and Medicaid allows them to have basic access to health care. And I just think it's very important that Kellyanne Conway is the one out here lying about this, because this isn't a Trump position. In fact, as far as, I mean, it is a Trump position because he'll sign the legislation because he doesn't care. And there's essentially, you can see the bargain here between Republicans and Trump. Republicans, McConnell and Ryan are there to run interference on Trump's corruption and out of controlness so he can keep enjoying being president and pursue his quest for personal enrichment and dodge investigations. That's what they're there to do. In exchange, Trump signs the America poorer, sicker, dumber agenda. And this is vital to it. You got to slash people off Medicaid to give the Koch brothers and Mike Bloomberg money. That's simply how it works. So when she's out there lying, it's not Kellyanne carrying crazy water for crazy Donald Trump. It's Kellyanne lying on behalf of an entire sociopath infrastructure of the Republican Party. And speaking of people who are going to be affected by this, this is a 33-year-old with spinal muscular atrophy, Michael Phillips. He appeared last night on The Last Word. Ari Melber was filling in for Lawrence O'Donnell, and he explained Friday rather. This was Friday. Filling in for Lawrence O'Donnell is Ari Melber, and this young man, Michael Phillips, is going to explain his future with Medicaid cuts, belying Kellyanne Conway's and the Republican Party's lies.
Hi, and good evening. First, I just want to say it's an honor to be here. I watch your legal analysis every day. You're spectacular. So, ever since November the 9th, 2016, I haven't been sleeping well. I've been scared. I've never been scared by the results of an election. It's an odd feeling. I've always felt like the federal government exists to protect citizens, even when state governments won't do so. Maybe especially when state governments won't do so. So, yes, I'm scared. Scared of what could happen to me if Medicaid cut comes to pass in Florida. And scared because Florida is bent on doing so because they know the federal government won't stop them. Though I'm quite disabled, Medicaid services allow me to live a full, productive life, interacting with the community, being cared for at home. I live at home. I have a personal care assistant. She takes me anywhere I want to go. The movies, Starbucks, dinner with friends, the tattoo shop when the mood takes me, which is often enough. I don't have a girlfriend right now, but I had one for quite a while, and I'd like to give things another go. I'm a published writer. I help to develop assistive technology. I'm not exactly Ryan Gosling, but I lead a good life. Losing Medicaid. Being forced into an institution, I'd lose everything. I'd lose the rights guaranteed to me under the Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People with disabilities know happiness isn't guaranteed, but we want a shot at it just like anybody else.
Mitch McConnell's watching it like, well, first thing that's going to happen is we're going to get rid of your fancy British voice box. And then we're going to take your machine and throw it in a bonfire so that there can be a tariff cut on certain opium shipments coming in from certain parts of the world.
The saddest thing about that, well, I mean, there's too many to pick from, but one of the sad things about that is his need to say, I write articles, I do this stuff, as if that justifies his existence.
Well, we saw that yesterday with the woman, or rather on Friday, with the woman talking with Shelley Caputo about her daughter who's still working full-time while she's fighting cancer. The notion that you need to demonstrate some sort of extraordinary human heroism for things that should be... Here's what I would say. I would say that the most lazy, mediocre, garbage people deserve to have health care. I would say that idiots that tweet at me about Sam Harris deserve to have health care. I would say that you don't need to demonstrate any particular academic accomplishment, any particular athletic or artistic or business or anything else to have housing, health care, food, shelter, and basic access to life. Those things should be on the house. Period.
This isn't a very good argument, but, you know, it doesn't apply to this last clip that we just watched. But, I mean, it's getting to the point where we're going to be offering people in prison, which I think that they should have all the rights that they do and more, better health care than people outside, like children, little, like newborn babies will be able to get.
Well, Michael Moore did that was something he did in his healthcare movie. It was kind of funny. He went.
Not that
he showed that Guantanamo base detainees had better healthcare than people. And he took
people in prison should have
people. I know
basic human rights. So I agree. You know, I mean, it's not
totally. I know you're not saying that people in prison should get
right.
Off for healthcare.
You know, and it just I don't. I mean, I just think everyone should be let out of prison, basically. So.
Well, all right. I love it.
Unless they killed someone or like assaulted them. I don't know. I don't care about the other stuff.
Prison should be for public safety, not punishment.
Yeah, everyone just,
I'll touch really briefly on two things. The day before the election, where is this? Shucks, I can't find it. Jared Kushner, trust fund baby slumlord Jared Kushner. Shut up, Kelly, and don't talk off mic. You told me to shut up. It's distracting.
Gosh.
It's distracting.
And you tell me not to talk off mic?
Yeah, it's distracting. Talk on mic.
Well,
Kushner's firm, Kushner's firm, let me reset. Trust fund baby slumlord Jared Kushner's firm received $285 million Deutsche Bank loan just before Election Day this past November. This is from a report in the Washington Post. Months before the election day, Jared Kushner's real estate company finalized a $285 million loan as part of a refinancing for its property near Times Square in Manhattan. The loan came at a critical moment. Kushner was playing a crucial role in the presidential campaign of his father-in-law, Donald Trump. The lender, Deutsche Bank, was negotiating to settle a federal mortgage fraud case and charges from New York state regulators that it aided Russian money laundering scheme. The case was settled in December and January. Kushner's own association with Deutsche Bank is among a number of financial matters that could come under his focus as his business activities are reviewed by special counsel Robert Mueller, who's examining Kushner as part of a broader investigation into possible Russian influence into the election. Now, all of this stuff, as we know, is all purely a function of almost certain criminality, influence peddling, and handing the keys to truly some of the most unethical, sleazy, and disgusting and grotesque people on the planet. I mean, the only public use of people like Jared and Ivanka is that they demonstrate Thomas Piketty's lessons about capital and the sclerotic nature of inherited wealth in modern capitalism. That's the only positive purpose that they serve. So we have an administration that we already know where there's no distinction between personal benefit, public policy, where basically it seems like almost in exchange for an arms deal with the Saudis, there's at least implicit sign-off from the Trump administration for a radical escalation in the Gulf states with Qatar and an insane list of Saudi demands, including cutting off Al Jazeera. And we see with this Deutsche Bank loan that, of course, Jared Kushner, like everybody else, is personally benefiting in a way that obviously arises to quite clear possible conflicts of interest, which are being criminally investigated.
It's working, and it's very exciting.
That's Jared Kushner on the Deutsche Bank deal. No, excuse me. That was him celebrating, or what was that? That was after his
with his tax
bat mitzvah.
Summit.
Oh, his tax summit, excuse me. Or after the selling arms to the homicidal Saudi monarchy. So I say this, and then, of course, we have stuff that isn't even, possibly criminal, but just stuff that we see day in and day out every day, like Mitch McConnell shutting down democracy in the Senate, first to steal the Supreme Court seat and then to create a healthcare destruction bill in secret, just specifically geared to the financial interests of essentially several hundred families in the United States, right? And then, of course, we had all of the pseudo scandals around Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, but also the fact that they, of course, voted for legislation that benefited the financial services industry while taking money from the financial services industry. The just sort of day in and day out bureaucratic corruption of our modern state. I say all this to say that there is a new major scandal brewing. I'm calling it Burlington Ghazi. That is an investigation of Jane and Bernie Sanders. Now, that's right. Bernie Sanders and his wife apparently are just as corrupt as anyone else, and they've had to lawyer up because of a possible FBI investigation. And here's basically what happened. Quoting now from Paste magazine. 2004, Jane Sanders, Bernie's wife, became president of Burlington College in Vermont. She orchestrated the purchase of a lakefront property at a discount from the Roman Catholic Diocese, who were financially burdened by lawsuits. It was a bad move. She had to take out a bunch of loans from various corners and anticipated financial benefits that never materialized. The deal was finalized in 2010, and Sanders was forced out in 2011. This is as president of Burlington College, partially because of financial matters and partially because of personal conflicts. The college closed in 2016. Brady Toensing, a Republican apparatchik in Vermont who chaired Trump's campaign in the state and has never liked Bernie, managed to get federal investigators involved and soon introduced allegations with absolutely no supporting evidence that Bernie Sanders used his position as senator to exert pressure on certain banks to approve a loan of the land deal. Toensing is famous for launching attacks on Democrats in the state, including the former governor. He even tried to nail Bernie Sanders on bogus campaign finance charges in 2016. And his mom was one of the Benghazi power players. But this is frivolous even by his standards. And so basically what you have here is that Jane Sanders was bad at leading a college. Sorry? Bad at leading college financially. I guess she could have been. Yes, that's right. Totally fair enough. She could have been good otherwise, but she made a risky decision. She made a plan on benefits that never materialized. Of course, in some way, I mean, it's the Enron scandal in some ways, banking future profits, except they literally put it as current profits. She just anticipated things that weren't there. There's an implication that's completely unproven that Bernie exerted pressure on banks. And now, like any sensible people, they have a retained counsel because they are the subject of a political witch hunt. And I just want to say, and we'll see, okay, maybe things will emerge. I think probably not. I think it's a boneheaded move.
You think that's pressure on banks?
Yeah, you think that's pressure on banks? Next time we'll come in, we won't fucking ask for it. I want to see your signature on my loan for my wife's hippie school, or your brains will be on that check. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Lakefront property for sale, and we want to take it for the school, and there's something wrong with that all of a sudden?
Oh, all of a sudden, look, my wife's a sweet goddamn hippie woman, and she wants those kids to learn art therapy, and she's going to get that loan. Or ask Steve Scalise. So anyways,
jokes about the guy who got shot.
I can't promise that.
Come on.
I can't promise that. So at any rate, but I just want to say, people like me who had no problem debunking through it. I think that there are real scandals around the Clintons, mainly just their politics and who they associate with and policies they pursue. But there was all sorts of insanity and nonsense that we still hear about. Seth Rich, the email obsession, which was dumb politics, but not this major global criminal enterprise that people made it out to be. The stuff on the Clinton Foundation that turned out to be bullshit. All of this stuff, and we debunked it, right? Even though we were Bernie people. I see dead-end Hillary-bot morons on Twitter celebrating the most flimsy pretense of a scandal imaginable. I mean, just when you hear the words loan for Burlington College come out of your mouth as some type of serious act of corruption, just reflect on yourself and how completely delusional you sound. So I would just say that if people who were progressive but not prone to conspiracy theories and didn't want to support reckless Republican witch cunts that were aided by the Republican Party, Republican apparatchiks, and the FBI, then witch hunts. Oh, my God. I wish you didn't point that out to me. I wish you didn't point that out to me. That's so bad. That's not good. Sad. I need more rest. If we can do that, I think that you can, at the very least, not try to make something out of Burlington Ghazi. Thank you. You're calling from a 503 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey.
Hey.
Sorry, you're on speakerphone. My name's Dan. I'm calling from Austin, Texas.
What's on your mind, man?
Hey, So
hey.
I was on Sam's side originally, but after hearing you and Kelly go at it, I think the infighting on the left has gotten out of hand.
Okay.
Anyways, so I
point, gotta have
recently found
integrity.
David Pakman.
Yeah.
And I've been watching some of his videos, and I've watched one on the regressive left.
Oh, God. Okay.
And I don't know if you've seen it or not, but
No, I haven't.
basically Oh, okay. So it's from last year. He defends the idea of the bigotry of soft expectations and
what's a Bush
you
term?
know, and he defends that who shall go unnamed.
Oh, we have some
so
of
anyways,
him soon. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I just want to get your opinion on.
Well,
Pakman.
I
don't
can't
very
comment on a video that I haven't seen. I know David Pakman personally. I like him personally. I haven't talked to him for a long time. I didn't see the video. I can speak generally. I did a video on the myth of the regressive left, although it wasn't in response, obviously, to Pakman because I haven't seen it. But look, I just think that, you know, can you find groups of people? Can you find people? Look, there's people on Twitter, on, you know, quote unquote woke Twitter, that are ridiculous. Okay, there's people like Arthur Chu, who I don't know what the hell is going on with that guy. All right, there's people that do become caricatures of themselves, and they, you know, make some very ridiculous arguments. But the criticism that I have of this whole regressive left thing is kind of in three parts. One is the basic premise that in a world where all of the issues that we're dealing with, if your focus is on some supposed crisis of PC culture or whatever, you're either really stupid or you're right wing. If you look at the world today and you open the Financial Times and you look at what's happening and you're like, oh my God, there's these kids at Oberlin don't want to hear Charles Murray, you're a fucking moron, or you're right wing, or both. Number two, it's not soft bigotry of low there. If you are unable to say, and I think some people do this because they genuinely don't know what they're talking about. Other people do it because they're cynical. But if you can't say, I understand as a matter of foreign policy and international relations that Saudi Arabia plays a negative role in funding terrorism and spreading Wahhabi ideology, just as one example. And that is a problem from a geostrategic perspective, and we need to address it. If you can't, and I also know that there are numerous strains of Islam, from Sufism in India to various strains in Indonesia to hybrids in Senegal. And it's not your job to know all these things, but if you want to comment on it, you need to, you know, again, sort of know the basics. And that I'm not going to make grand sweeping generalizations about over 1 billion people and then also more disastrously support policies that ban them as refugees, kill them as civilians, prop up dictatorships, because not just because it's the wrong thing to do, but because, in fact, it undermines security. That's number two, and that's more problematic. And then number three, you know, it's just it's basically the Islam principle expanded more broadly to everything else. And you start to look at where those arguments go. Now, I assume that David doesn't, because, and again, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen his work in a long time, but my assumption is that, you know, David's still a pretty liberal guy. But obviously, if you look at like Dave Rubin, I mean, it's just soft alt-right gateway drug bullshit. And what happens when you take a pseudo-analytic, pseudo-empirical, ahistorical, acontextual, and then ironically, for people who are always talking about rigor and open dialogue, you can get away with not having to read or know anything because you have the answers. You read a Quran quote from Sam Harris. Do you need to read a history book? No. Do you need to learn Arabic? No. Do you need to know anything? And then, of course, like people like
Right,
me
yeah.
who, you know, I get like as if, I mean, I've been accused of being a secret Muslim. These people are insane. They're nuts. And they don't know what they're
Yeah.
talking about. And it's a cult. And it's a cult that always disturbed me because I saw it coming in terms of you're not that many ticks over from Richard Spencer. You're not that many ticks over from Charles Murray. And I still get the tweets like, you condemn the bell curve, but you're not willing to understand empirical differences. Well, actually, I did do a video where I explained that those so-called empirical differences come from fraud research, including research that came explicitly from a neo-Nazi group. But again, people don't want to do so. Ironically, people that have built their whole brand on intellectual rigor are basically advocating a response of kind of pseudo-quantitative certainty that requires no reading, no thought, no interaction, and endorses a reactionary agenda, which usually just ends up propping up anti-Muslim bias, anti-woman bias, and everything else. It sucks. It's boring, and I wish I didn't have to comment on it.
Yeah, I understand. And, you know, it struck me with the bell curve and Murray and everything. So I read an article where they reran the same data that he used to support some of his arguments about IQ being predictive of success in the future. And they found that it only explained about 5% variance in outcomes. And then I think that that's probably at play with, and I'll say it, you might have to beat me or whatever, but Islamic, radical Islamic terrorism it may be a factor religion, but it probably only explains like 3% or whatever.
But I've said
latch
that
onto it.
I don't know about the regression study of Charles Murray, and I would be very questioning of any statistic like that. I can't comment on that one because I haven't looked at it. But like even the second point, I've said in every single video I've done that if you specify it and say that a version of Wahhabism is connected to it ideologically, anybody who knows what they're talking about has said that. And if you go to any conversation with anybody on that issue who has any foreign policy expertise or experience, like you have people like Sam Harris who claim that they're speaking at some exalted level. They're actually, it's like the scene, you know what Sam Harris is like? It's like the scene in Good Will Hunting where he solves the complex equation on the chalkboard and, you know, shocks everybody because he's not an MIT student. It would be like as if he was actually married the chalkboard with a basic fractions answer, but walked off as if he had solved. Like there is no conversation among people that do policy or history or anything that's taking place at that level. And it's one thing if it's amusing that some, you know, guy was funded to travel Asia for 10 years and was living off of Golden Girls money, which is where his money comes from, turned himself up into some like weird puffed up neo-atheist, whatever, who cares? But when it turns into this clip I'm about to play, it's actually genuinely very disturbing. So let me play this clip. I got to jump, man. I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot. And I've had to try to explain this to my brothers who are very smart people and some close friends. And I appreciate all your segments on it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yep. So this is Sam Harris, who I haven't dealt with for a long time. But I've always seen this kind of soft alt-right nerdism and this ahistorical and also look, I know a million people are I already know what you're going to say. I'm taking them out of context and Islam is not a race. It's bad ideas, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, when you support things like a Muslim ban, it is highly racialized and it's highly geographic. Islam is not really about ideas. Religion is everything from customs, culture, philosophy, to politics, to social norms, many of which are really problematic and terrible in all religions, okay? It's not terribly complicated. But what Sam Harris is saying here with the nodding acquiescence of Majid Nawaz, who really just comes off looking just pathetic and embarrassing here, is an endorsement of Donald Trump policies in a cult leader, boring voice, and really grotesque and disturbing generalizations that affect real people. And I would suggest you look up some actual real stories before you comment on it and whine about him being taken out of context.
what is the fucking point of having more Muslims in your society? It seems perfectly rational to say, we don't want any more. We have enough, right? And certainly increasing the percentage is not a help to anyone who loves freedom of speech and anything else, any of the other liberal values that you and I just spoke about maximizing. It's not worth the trouble. And if we can figure out some way to keep the number of Muslims down in any society, whether we're honest about this or whether we do this covertly, clearly it's rational to want to do this. And this is where someone like Robert Spencer would say amen, I would presume. Can you speak to that despair? And I mean, again, this is not an expression of xenophobia. This is an expression of the implication of statistics and the fact that it's only rational not to want to live in a world that looks more and more like Jerusalem at the height of the Intifada, right?
Right. That's delusional on many levels, but let's break it down. Okay. I would suggest that the way to preserve quote-unquote liberal values is by protecting, as an example, robust constitutional norms while they're under assault. That might be something that's significant. So I would suggest, while you have a far-right extremist, which you yourself have endlessly pointed out, according to your followers, you oppose, is trying to push, and might, with a far-right Supreme Court, a unconstitutional violation of non-religious discrimination, which is written into, our Constitution, which might be slightly more important than your thought experiments. I would suggest that preserving those protections is slightly more important for this great liberal society, which you seem to care so much about. It seems to me that the only outgrowth of the liberal society that you're interested in is in endless, boring, bigoted wankathons with your friends. Go ahead.
Harris is super concerned about protecting our liberal values like free speech and such. But once again, one of these people who is standing up for these liberal values, Majid Nawaz, is talking about how he's going to take people to court for defamation. And I don't think enriching libel lawyers is really the best way to strengthen free speech, as far as I'm concerned.
That's exactly, and we'll get to, look, first I'll throw a few statistics out that will make no difference to Harris followers. But according to an FBI report, and this, granted, this is from 1980 to 2005, but it hasn't changed significantly since then, 94% of terrorist acts carried in the United States were by non-Muslims. Non-Muslims make up a majority of terrorist attacks in Europe. Actually wrong. They make up about 2%. And even if, and I'll quote now from this piece in Huffington Post, even if Muslims carried out all these attacks, which is a absurd assumption, given the fact mentioned in my first point, those terrorists would still represent less than 0.9% of all Muslims. To put things in perspective, that you are more than likely to be struck by lightning in your lifetime than a Muslim is likely to commit a terrorist attack during the same time span. And if so many Muslims don't engage in any activity, then, I mean, this is the other point. If all Muslims are terrorists because a single-digit percentage of terrorists happen to be Muslims, then all Muslims are peacekeepers because 5 of the past 12 Nobel Peace Prize winners, 42%, have been Muslims. And it goes on and on and on with all these statistics, which, again, is irrelevant to people like Sam Harris because they're bigots. And Sam Harris always talks about Muslims, quote-unquote, hiding the ball. When is Sam Harris going to stop hiding the ball? If you hate a religion and have an irrational fixation and fear on it, where you can't talk about it rationally, you can't make basic distinctions, which anybody with any credibility in the field that you claim to be working in make, and you sound like a deranged conspiracy theorist and a bigot, and you're giving a shout out to Richard Spencer, when are you going to stop hiding the ball and admit that disproportionately those people come from certain parts of the world and you're fine with discriminating against them and you don't want them by you? And then as for Majid Nawaz, look, his whole brand is he's a moderate Muslim whose work can be harmonized with a liberal society. Every time he collaborates with Sam Harris is saying the possibility of that basically doesn't exist. Because the only real Islam is terrorist supporting fanaticism, which, as we've already said a million times, if you know anything about Islam, is a product of modern history and foreign policy. literally, not just like a byproduct of U.S. misdeeds, but like literally a geostrategy of Saudi Arabia, a strategy of Iran in a different way, a strategy of Qatar in a different way. So Majid Nawaz's whole raison d'etre, which is to say there is an Islam that can work with the rest, is entirely undermined by constantly sharing platforms with a bigoted pseudo-expert who constantly says that the only real Muslims are fanatics. It's disgusting. Look, I'm sure I'll hear the same thing from all of you and your broken records and you're in a cult, but honestly, and I really mean this sincerely, read Ghost Wars, read Robert Malley, even read a book like Heart of Islam. It's a basic primer on Islam. I mean, just do something. Get out of the basement of Sam Harrisism. It's embarrassing.
Also, most victims of terrorism worldwide are Muslim.
Well, of course.
But this is not the way that this narrative is presented in any context. I mean, when I say most, I read a statistic that said 90% in an article, and I looked further into it, and they don't of course know exactly, but it's experts estimate that it's somewhere around there. It could be like down to like maybe like 85, or it could be to 95. So it's really an insane overreaction to have so much talk about how this is affecting non-Muslim people.
Yeah, but the implication would be that those Muslims deserve it because they're Muslims.
And
I've heard them say that. I mean, I've even heard Bill Maher. Bill Maher said on a show once, "Why are we interfering with Syria? They're all killing each other."
It was with Bill Maher, who Nawaz said he's going to take a Southern Poverty Law Center to court.
It's just, I mean, it's
yeah.
pathetic.
I mean, okay. Bill Maher and Islam, like, do we even really need to discuss it any further? Because it's just, I can't.
As long as people take this garbage seriously, I guess unfortunately we do. But I mean, obviously you're right. I mean, it's just again, and I would just say to everybody, Sam Harris always talks about stop hiding the ball. But the problem is that the fanatics don't hide the ball because they're supporting fanatic fatwas. And the people in London who just said that they won't bury terrorists in Islamic burials anymore, they're not hiding the ball. They're saying it doesn't represent Islam. Why don't you say what you are? You're a trust fund baby, pseudoscientist, neoconservative who hates Muslims, doesn't like Trump, I know, and you don't care who a Muslim ban affects, and you don't care how it affects the constitutional viability of this country, because you have an irrational fixation on these people. And I would look up, there's a great blog post, which I'll tweet out, but I think it was on his own, all about how Sam Harris got this supposed PhD in neuroscience and how shoddy the research was that's constantly being cited to me. I mean, just be serious. Exactly. PhDs have intrinsic value. In fact,
his PhD does not seem as
you've got true Gorka.
Incredible.
Read it up on it.
As Gorka.
Yes, he's not as dumb. Well, actually, Gorka knows more about politics than Sam Harris. He definitely does.
Well, no, I'm saying, but Gorka's PhD is completely, and I'm saying maybe I should say uncredible. I mean, it's ridiculous. But Harris's seems less so. That doesn't mean that he knows what he's talking about.
Well, I'm going to read now from this post really quickly. Two interesting parts arise from the tales of Sam Harris's PhD thesis. This is his own blog spot. First, where did he get the money? MRI machines are an expensive piece of research, and they're often rented for short periods of time at great expense. But now you should be able to guess the answer. This is in the middle of the piece. Sam naturally had it covered through his personal wealth and connections. Right around this time he was beginning his thesis, Harris founded the quote-unquote Reason Project, a charitable foundation devoted to spreading scientific knowledge and secular values in society. The Reason Project was apparently feeling particularly charitable about Sam, and it provided funds for his PhD, including the use of facilities and MRI machine. Once again, mum to the rescue. The second problem was potentially more difficult. Sam had no history in neuroscience and had never conducted an experiment in his life. It's hard to imagine UCLA neuroscience department accepting his PhD proposal until you remember that by this stage, Sam was highly connected, filthy rich, and becoming famous. He was given the red carpet treatment by UCLA. Sam got to pretend to do science while the professionals got to do the work. The various research jobs were passed to his co-authors. Conducting the experiments, recruiting participants, and designing the entire study were taken off little Lord Fauntleroy's hands. Ultimately, Sam's sole responsibility was a final write-up, which is less the account of a scientific experiment and more a screed about his personal reviews on religion and narcissistic flexing of his intellectual cred. From the introduction, well, there may be many Catholics, for instance, who value the ritual of Mass without believing the doctrine of transubstantiation. The primacy of Mass within the Church still hinges on the fact that many Catholics do accept it as a metaphysical truth that can be directly attributed to specific doctrinal claims still put forward by the Church. First of all, that's not what metaphysical means. That's right. And secondly, what does this have to do with a behavioral MRI study? Indeed, this is back to Harris, humanity seems to be proportionally more religious as a combination of material advancement, and secularism is strongly correlated with a decrease in fertility. When one considered the rise of Islamism through the Muslim world, the spread of Pentecostalism throughout Africa, and the I can't read this last part because of the print. I apologize. Becomes clear that religion will have geopolitical consequences well into the 21st century. Again, is this neuroscience or Sam's new blog post? Then he goes on to explain how these MRI things that were basically supposed to measure rationality and decision-making were, I won't go completely down the rabbit hole, but the point is that even the notion of extending the respect of he has a PhD in neuroscience, I'm not doing anymore. Don't quote this guy to me. He's running a pseudo-intellectual cult fueled on bigotry, and it's disgusting. And every second that we're not talking about it, we're not discussing real things that involve these issues that are actually quite important.
Okay, now that you have concluded this segment, I would like to point out that I really, really, really want to request that you stop using trust fund baby in the same category. Earlier you called him a trust fund baby, xenophobe. Those two things are not even remotely similar. Now, the problem that you mentioned with money influencing his degree at UCLA is a very real systemic problem that we have in this country. And people get into colleges because they have money and because their parents are legacies or their parents have money and they don't deserve it. People get to do things like this experiment and buy themselves PhDs, and that's all true. But it's a systemic problem. It is not. Jared Kushner didn't weasel his way into Harvard. His dad did it. Okay?
What? So, are you kidding me? Come on.
I mean, yes, he got into Harvard and he didn't deserve it, but like
it's so much.
Not,
I'm sorry, Kelly. It's so much deeper than that, and I can't. Like I can't. Yes,
it's not
I
a personality flaw that these people have.
Yes,
that they have been
if they're
born with money.
If they're exercising it without any shame to their advantage, it is. And I can't, and especially with Jared Kushner, if you read any articles
I hate Jared Kushner too.
If you read any articles about how he has dealt with people, and I have people very. Kelly, let me.
I have nothing.
You
asked
good me to say. Not interrupt you.
I have nothing good to say. Yeah, but you talk for 99%. Yeah,
because that's what I'm doing. That's
yeah, I know. I get it.
Here.
But now that I'm talking, I have nothing good to say about Jared Kushner. Nothing. He didn't run a business well. Okay. He doesn't treat people well. He's horrible now Kelly, that he's in power.
People's inherited wealth is a real factor, and it is going to be part of my descriptions
but that doesn't.
Of them.
It doesn't. I mean, if you're a xenophobe,
when you make comments,
that doesn't belong in the same sentence as the fact that you inherited wealth.
When you make comments about sexism and misogyny, as an example, I don't always have to jump up and say not all men. It doesn't.
I don't even make those comments anymore on this show.
But whatever. That's the point. Is I don't need to say it.
No,
you don't need to worry about it.
That you
all right, we got to take a call. I'm not going to stop using that term. I'm not going to.
You don't have to, but you can't equate it with these other terrible character traits that people are personally responsible for.
They're
being
xenophobic,
being racist.
Okay. I mean, I hear your point.
You're responsible for your thoughts and actions when it comes to that.
And you're responsible for exploiting your inherited wealth to other people's damage as well.
You weren't born racist. That's what I'm saying.
You're calling from a 412 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
This is John from Iowa.
Hey, John, what's on your mind?
I don't like it when mom and dad fight. It's really disturbing. You know, I feel like I have to go to my room.
I know, me too.
Hide, and it's just, I don't like it.
I know, it's stressful. What's on your mind?
Stressful. But I actually wanted to call. I called in about 10 days ago about calling your senators, opening a ticket. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I did. Yep.
Last week I was in D.C., so walked into with a coworker. So I walked into the two senators from Iowa, and he's from Pennsylvania. So we walked into two senators from Pennsylvania, and we met with three. It was about 30 minutes after the health care bill was revealed, and we sat down with if not the lead for the healthcare team, one of the staffers on the healthcare team for 3 out of 4 senators. And the only one we didn't was because they weren't physically there. So I wanted to relay that to everyone, that if you suit up, look respectable, walk in with polite insistence to talk to someone about a specific problem, the people who seem further off than usual become very available to you. So we sat down with each of them for about 10 to 15 minutes and laid out our case. Mainly, I laid out the case for Sam's issue with, mine issue too, with selling insurance across state lines from states with a waiver. And asked them specifically to use the blunt force of government to disallow that happening.
Okay.
We got platitudes, but then we get emails to follow up. So if you're feeling frustrated, I wanted to relay this to the audience. If you're feeling frustrated, do something about it. It actually, I feel, inch by inch does make a big difference. Show up to the offices. If you can go to Washington, D.C., walk into your senator's office and politely insist to meet with the person heading up the team for the problem that you're having. It really goes a long way.
Appreciate the call, man. Thank you so much.
Yep. See you guys.
All right. Is there any of these other pieces of sound that we should get to before we jump?
Only if you want to get to either the Spencer or... we have to.
Okay. All right. We're really tight now, though. Okay, let's do this. To hell with Richard Spencer. We already covered all that garbage with Harris. So we talk a lot on the show about dragging the body to the park, which is the precursor to the Seth Rich conspiracy. And Republican Congressman Pete Olson of Texas, who was appearing on the Sam Malone program in Houston, had some speculation about President Clinton's tarmac meeting with Loretta Lynch. This is amazing that they're still bringing this up. We have multiple investigations swirling around somebody who's in office, who we know on the public record ran like a scam university, but we're still going back to this meeting. And this is Congressman Olson speculating as to what may have been said during that meeting.
It was an out-of-control week, and then you tap on Congressman. The former director of the FBI leaked it out.
That was amazing, Sam, that he admitted he leaked it. It's like, oh, my gosh.
Bro, that's
Are
pretty...
you kidding me?
That's you got the fact that he's like, he's a disgruntled employee, and we've all been fired, and you hate your boss when you get fired, and you're like, I'm going to get him back. But generally, your husband or wife says, oh, go have a beer and look for a new job. He leaks out a memo. That poor law professor at Columbia is probably like, dude, what did you bring my name into this for? And then we find out that the Obama White House's attorney general was trying to clamp down on his speech about Hillary's investigation.
Oh, Sam, you know that, hey, it's awfully strange that Mr. Clinton bumped into Miss Lynch there in, I guess it was, Vegas or Phoenix or somewhere out there?
Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona.
The day before she may be indicted, they just happened to pass, and it wasn't a terminal, Sam, it was on a tarmac. They expect us to think that it's like Bill was driving by and said, hey, there's my girlfriend, Roletta, stop the plane, I got to talk to Roletta right now. I guarantee you they had a conversation, and he basically said, Mrs. Lynch, call your attack dog off. We have killed people. We killed Vince Foster. We destroyed Webb Hubble. We will destroy you. And then what happened next day? All of a sudden, well, she did it. Yeah, it was all terrible. Don't know who got the information. Very classified, but no indictment.
Exactly. Congressman Olson.
Well, It's true, except my wife forced me to do it because I have no agency left. Can we just say, if you're on the dum-dum left, this is where you're getting some of your talking points from.
Olson has since said he was a step too far and wouldn't use those words again, whatever that apology signifies.
That's great. I apologize. We're only going to take 2 more quick calls. You're calling from an 810 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Oh man. This is Chadwick calling steps from the industrially ravaged Flint River in sunny, beautiful Flint, Michigan, USA.
Oh, wow. How's it going, man?
Well, I'll tell you what. If you don't want to stream the show, just call the number. It's kind of nice.
Okay.
Just listen in the background. No, I'm just kidding. What I'm actually calling about is kind of a non sequitur. You talked about it on Friday of last week. And I'm here to back up Kelly a little bit. You guys ended the show somewhere around the idea that, I think, if I remember this correctly, you were talking about that a slogan should come last in the process to get people together to put together an idea.
Not exactly. No? Yeah.
Well,
but anyways, just make your point.
Say is that the point being that I really, really, really feel that Trump nailed it, or rather Trump's team. I'm not a Trump supporter, but Make America Great Again did a huge amount of work for the man. And people who don't know anything about him, they see that slogan, they go, yeah, for sure, I'm in it. I'm with that, whatever it happens to be.
Okay.
And I don't remember anything on the left side or even a progressive. I don't even remember Sanders' slogan, and I'm with her is not, that doesn't do the same thing. I don't know. I just feel that if there was if they just started with branding, the left could do so much better with everything. I don't know. I don't know if they're just non-creative types over there, people with just crap ideas. But
no, I think that actually is
I don't know.
I think Hillary needed to talk a lot more about policy, to be honest. And I also think that you can't sell a brand if you don't have credibility to sell it. But I agree. There are some communication problems. Thanks for the call, man. All right, this is the last call of the day. Then we'll race through a few IMs. You're calling from a 916 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Charles from California.
Hey, Charles, what's going on?
Not much. Just to ask a quick question. So if the AHCA passes, God forbid, if it's as terrible as it's projected to be, is this going to actually, are Republicans going to be shooting themselves in the foot, or are they going to have to
I don't know.
worry about
it's going to be hard for someone
election?
like Dean Heller might be in trouble. But, the bill is designed for the worst parts to kind of kick in in 2022, 2024. So
later.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're going to, buy themselves some time. But some people could be in trouble.
I see.
Appreciate the call, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
It's hard to predict what the future electoral landscape's going to look like. I think we're in sort of unmoored from what we used to be.
Yeah. Nuclear Negroid, why hasn't Matt added from the new Joe Scarborough EP to the bumper playlist? I don't know what that means.
No, yeah.
What is that? What is it?
He has songs, and I just saw an
Wait,
article.
Joe Scarborough has songs?
Oh, yeah. And he had laryngitis, and he performed anyway at a club in New York over the weekend. I am not sure about his EP. We'll have to look into it. Mika was there.
I'll review it.
Tyler Steve Bingham. Knock, knock. Who's there? No, I don't like that. Oh, wait. I don't like that joke. It's bad about Matt? No, it's about Seth Rich. It's about Seth Rich. See, the joke is not that Seth Rich was killed. Ha, ha, ha. That's not the joke. Wall Gone Indie. I love Owen Jones. Thanks for having him on. Between him and Matt. I don't know where to put and Matt in the background scenes video, I don't know where to put up my bedroom wall next to my Bloom Lagoon poster of Chris Atkins. Boom. MR member, my brother, as I Ammer Edgewater Joe, is recovering from a stroke yesterday. He has a way to go, but needs an annoying horn for a well-rich, of course. Max from Maryland. If the reason Sam hasn't been able to host the show is because he's actually poolside getting served by... Okay. That was a fusion of a Hillary house slave and Seth Rich joke. That's all I'll say. With some sexual innuendo. Louise from Texas. I love my riveting Michael Monday. After a horrifying weekend and the usual Trump-era gloom begins early during the week. Every week the travel ban is back and it's racist. This is why the Supreme Court matters and why the Democrats need to get back into government with two brain cells to rub together. Everyone with two brain cells needs to get together, needs to get involved. Ryan from Ohio, great interview. It affirms something I already knew about Hillary. Her arguments about free education's helping rich kids not needing to be actually prevented a coalition like the one in the UK. Evil Hess, I'm surprised you guys brush off Russia so much. It seems serious, makes the Trump administration look corrupt and treasonous, and shows the Republicans to be much more interested in their craven agenda than our democracy. Why aren't you and others on the left making more of this? I think we have.
We did a whole segment on Kushner.
Yeah, that was it. Jerkis, if you check out the fallout from the Tim Black debate, I watched the video of Hard Bastard and Tim Black's response, and it's hilarious how they gloss over Sam's arguments. And instead focus how Sam said Russia helped his agenda, and they got crazy over Sam interrupting Tim and not let him talk, even when he let Tim talk uninterrupted several times. I saw some of the Hard Bastard video. That was genuinely one of the most stupid things I've ever seen in my life. It's incredible what's getting bred on the internet. Contagious Chameleon, all this talk about how to win is a little misguided. The strategy of the Democratic Party seems to be to gain biggest mass appeal, to tiptoe around concerns and criticisms, essentially not playing to lose. The strategy is playing to win. That means you run on your beliefs, run confidently, confront all criticism with alternatives instead of broad appeal. Work towards getting your message out to many people as possible, regardless of your belief. Josh Harding, that is way too long. Okay. Oh, Matt, did you get the Reefer Kick song? All right. This will be the final I am of the day. Not safe to drink. Worth checking out. Me and Reefer Cake Talk on Friday came to bat for MR points, but put a fork in reporting on Seth Rich and DNC lawsuit until there's actually weight on the stories. Check it out, y'all. Okay, let's play the Jimmy song and then transition to Pilot Light.
Yeah. It's called No More Milquetoast Stems.
No More Milquetoast Stems by Jimmy Reefer Cake.
Look at awesome and how he lost it with so much money. Oh, you look so phony. They say no more milquetoast Democrats. No more milquetoast Democrats. Yeah. Nancy Pelosi, you gotta go see how the Democrats keep on losing, 'cause people are choosing. They're saying no more milquetoast Democrats, no more milquetoast Democrats. Maybe a man can live on toast that's been soaked in milk, but it tastes like crap and it's not so good for your health. No more milquetoast Democrats, milquetoast Democrats. Say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, even though you keep on losing the game. I just want to know no more milquetoast Democrats, no more milquetoast Democrats, please.
Definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. You might want to reflect on that. Kelly says that that's not the definition of insanity. All right, everybody. With that important correction, I know it's not. It's what is it? It's an Einstein quote, right? Well, it's a Morgan Freeman quote. I saw it online. All right, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm going guess somehow I lost